Look at all of these people.
Hey, John.
Look at all of these good people.
Welcome, everyone.
Buen día, Emanuel.
Bienvenidos, welcome.
Hi, John. Antonio, Kathleen, Jane, Hector, Dan, Kerry.
All right, I see you, Mr. Shorenstein.
Greetings.
And greetings to you, my dear friend.
Héctor, qué gusto verte.
Hola, Héctor.
Hola, perdón, estaba en otra cámara. Mucho gusto.
Bienvenido.
Un placer.
Hi, David, and everyone.
Trishal, a good evening to you.
Very good evening.
And Hector, a pleasure to meet you virtually.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you here too. Thank you.
And Marta, good morning.
Buen día, David. Buen día,
Muy
Héctor.
buenas.
Hola, Marta. Bienvenido.
Hola, Emanuel. Buen día.
Hola Marta, buen día, un gusto.
Buen día. Mucho gusto.
We're going to wait a little bit to have more people joining.
Okay.
But in the meantime, what you can do is use the chat and put your name, if you want the city or the country where you are right now. If you need Spanish, in the translation, you can put the ESP in capital letter. And also, if you want to mention if you're part of an organization, you can also mention it. So here.
Emma, maybe you can say all of that in Spanish now.
Yes. So, y ahora, bueno, podéis poner en el chat vuestro nombre, el sitio donde estáis ahora, ciudad, país, y si necesitáis traducción a castellano, pues poner el ESP. Gracias.
Quienes necesiten traducción al español, hay un canal de interpretación en español y pueden ir directamente, ya está Sofía esperando ahí, va a traducir toda la sesión en español. Van a ver que hay un botón de interpretación y ahí tienen que seleccionar español. Es muy simple.
Welcome, everyone. We're going to wait a couple of minutes more. People are joining. Hi, everyone. I was unmuted. So we're going to wait a couple of minutes for people to join. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos y todas. People from Agastya, India here. Got John from New Jersey. Spain, more people from India. Agastya from India.
Woodstock, New York.
The UK. John, the UK.
Middlebury, Vermont. Hey, Kate, nice to see you.
can get started. If you just join, you can put your name and writing where you are right now in the world. And if you also want to mention if you're part of an organization, you're welcome to do it. Okay, right. Familiar faces here, new faces. Great. So, you might have noticed, but this session is being recorded. Okay, so if you don't want to appear in this recording, well, you can switch off the camera. But of course, if not, we encourage you to switch on the camera so that we can all see your faces, and it's a bit better for the connection. We invite you to use the chat as much as possible, where you can write your reflections, questions. Okay. Any doubt you have, use the chat. As mentioned before, if you need Spanish, you can also put it in the chat. And we're having now interpretation here. Yes, along the session, we're going to share with you also a link, our email, which is going to be very important, because at the end, we'll explain you what is going to be the follow-up, right? So now welcome to the new people who've just joined, okay? So, right, let's get started. Perhaps we could introduce ourselves very briefly, okay? So you can recognize us, the organizer, because we all got the, in brackets, the TWWW, okay, the world we want. So, Amy, would you like to start? You are muted, Amy.
Not an auspicious start. Okay. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Welcome. Thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us in conversation about democratic and ethical practices in formal and informal settings. I'm Amy Halpern-Laff, co-executive director of the Ethics in Education Network. Your host organizations are Agastya International Foundation in India, the Center for Artistry and Scholarship in Argentina and the US, Ethics in Education Network and its podcast Ethical Schools in the US, and Thinking with You in Spain. We share a commitment to helping educators empower the next generation with knowledge and skills to create just and sustainable communities and institutions. As we begin, we honor teachers and youth workers everywhere in urban, rural, and semi-urban communities who meet immense challenges each day. We hold close the millions of children and families living amid climate chaos, famine, and war. Our first three-part series explores nature, place, and education, belonging, kinship with the earth, and what communities need to flourish where they are. Future salons will turn to democratic schools, student leadership and agency, and how to scale successful practices beyond individual schools and programs. We hope that over the course of these salons, we'll all make connections across borders and continents, form supportive communities of like-minded educators and youth workers, gain new insights, and most importantly, apply what we've learned to strengthen our collective work.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. And behind this organization, there are a few people, okay? So let's introduce ourselves very briefly. So you've just met Amy. Shirley, I think you're next.
My name is Shirley Edwards, and I am the co-chair of Ethics in Education Network in New York.
Thank you, Shirley. We also got Juan.
Hello, everybody. I'm Juan. I'm the executive director for the Center of Artistry and Scholarship, and I spend my time between Argentina and the US.
Yeah. John, thank you, Juan.
Hi, I'm John
I'm
John Moscow, and I'm the co-executive director with Amy of Ethics in Education Network and co-host with her of the Ethical Schools podcast.
Thank you, John. David.
Yes, indeed. I'm David Penberg, and I'm coming to you from the Hudson Valley in upstate New York, the home of Rip Van Winkle and the ancestral home of the Lenape Indians. And I'm associated with the Agastya International Foundation.
Thank you, David. And I'm Emmanuel. So I'm from France, but now I'm based in Spain, in Asturias, a beautiful region in north of Spain. And I work for Thinking With You, another co-sponsor of the World We Want. So welcome, everyone. And of course, we invite you, if you want to know more about us, about our organization, to contact with us through the email we'll be sharing along this event. Okay, so David.
So I thought that to set the context for our two guests, I would share with everyone two short excerpts from two very profound human beings. One is Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, and the other is an author of a children's book, Nat Cordoso, called Origin. Before I read the excerpts, I just wanted to say there's a proverb, an indigenous Hawaiian proverb that I think really captures what we're trying to uncover and share together, and that is the relationship of the natural world to our sense of place and to the purpose of education. And the proverb is this, that where we live defines how we live. With that, this is Robin Wall Kimmerer in talking about her childhood. She says, "In those childhood fields waiting for strawberries to ripen, I would eat the sour white ones, sometimes out of hunger, but mostly impatience. I remember lying on my back in the fields, watching the clouds go by and rolling over to check if the berries were ready. When I was young, I thought that change might happen fast. And I know the transformation is slow. The commodity economy has been here on Turtle Island for 400 years, eating up the white strawberries and everything else. But people have grown weary of the sour taste in their mouths. A great longing is upon us to live again in a world made of gifts. I can scent it coming, like the fragrance of ripening strawberries rising on the breeze." One other, I think, really profound letter to actually young people all over the world from this book, Origins. It goes like this, a portion. "Cities can be jungles where sirens roar and advertisements of things like smiling chickens are all around you. Bright flashes and loud noise cover the silence. And in your hand, maybe you hold a digital totem that connects you with everyone all the time, but it doesn't protect you. I don't really know what you look like or the landscape that's reflected in your face, countryside or city, north or south, but you should know that you're unique, different, and important. Your voice and your decisions are too. You are part of this world, and the world is part of you. We all inhabit a landscape. Our lives are interwoven with the stone, the ant, and the river. Recognizing this links and expands our horizons. This is the greatest of our achievements." And finally, Earth is alive. Self-respect also involves respecting what surrounds us, nature, the ecosystem, the atmosphere, the earth, our resources, and each other. Maybe from where you are, you can feel that you're a part of this community. This also makes us responsible. How much might we go through understanding that there are other ways to live? Perhaps it's time to remember that nature lives inside each of us and that we all come from the same origin. Back to you, Manuel.
Thank you very much, David. Beautiful. Well, let's continue with nature, shall we? We're going to have now a little checking to see, well, first we asked you to write on the chat your name and where you are in the world, but now, how are you arriving? How are you feeling now? And we're going to ask you to use metaphor from nature, okay? I'm going to give you a couple of example that represent now my state of mind. So the prompt would be, today I arrive like, and then you continue with the nature metaphor. Mine would be, today I arrive like a river that keeps flowing. Okay, and I've got another one, but one is enough. The other one would be also from gratitude. Today I arrive like a child discovering a hidden path in the woods. So now we invite you to do the same in the chat, or if you want to share, if you want to unmute and share with us, that's perfectly fine. So let's do this little checking, couple of minutes here. How are you arriving today? Blooming after the rain. Ah, beautiful. I'm reading those from the chat. Today I arrived wide awake as a sunflower in the heart of summer. Yes, beautiful. And John Moscow arrives like spring, even though it is winter. Yes. I arrive hopeful, happy to meet and to be with others. Today I arrive like a willow blowing in the winds, but still rooted in the earth with roots deep into earth. Right, beautiful. I arrive today like the mist covering the hills. Yes. Today I arrive like a trickling waterfall. Open like the vastness of the universe. Wow. I arrive today like a fast-moving warm front in the sky, ready to face a cold front. Beautiful. Today arrives as I've been battling the elements for a long time and leaning forward. I feel I have to push again against the northern wind. And more. Wow, beautiful. So many. That's lovely. Thank you very much for so many sharing, so much sharing. Yes, I invite you to go to the chat and read the rest of them, because now we have to continue. Among us, we've got two very special guests, and David, perhaps we can go back to you. Why don't you tell us a bit more about those two people, please?
Emmanuel, thank you. Everyone, I am deeply honored to have the chance to introduce our two distinguished guests. And what they have in common, other than their brilliance as visionaries and as practitioners in the world of education, is that they're also good human beings. And by that, I mean what the poet Rilke calls having a beginner's mind. They are both astute listeners. They ask thoughtful questions as a way of understanding, and they're driven by a lifelong sense of curiosity. Juan Mora, who will be our first speaker, describes himself as an educator, a strategist, and a social entrepreneur, who for over 15 years has worked in the spaces of public policy, supporting educational institutions, building and growing alliances between institutions, all of which is driven by a vision of transforming how young people learn, connect, and shape their future. So before Juan will speak with us for the next 5 to 7 minutes, we've asked both speakers to reflect on the core questions that you would find in the chat. They're at the very beginning. So 3 guiding questions that we asked them. Which I'm trying to see here.
David, I'm going to post them.
Please do. Okay. And with that, while listening to the response of both speaker, use the chat to pose questions, make comments, or in your own notebook. But please be an active listener. Okay. Juan, without any further ado, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much, David. And thanks, everyone. It's so lovely to have an opportunity to meet in this space with caring folks from all over the world. We have similar concerns, similar dreams, similar work, and I venture to say similar fears about what is happening in many parts of the world and to humanity in general. I think I don't think we can separate what happens to one group of human beings from what happens to humanity as a whole. And yet I'm hopeful, and I hope that what I bring today is the possibility to share some of that hopefulness. Before I actually start, I'd like all of you to think about, if you will, about what you love most from nature. And you don't have to say it, you can just thinking and bring it to your awareness. When you think about nature, what do you most love about nature? And this is just for you. And as you look at the questions that were posted in the chat, perhaps I'll start with the word reciprocity, because so much of what we do with the Center for Artistry and Scholarship, when we help schools transform or when we help schools start anew, whether we do it in the United States or in Romania or in Argentina or in Uruguay or in Mexico, and I'll share some of these experiences. Really, what we bring to the front is always the urgency that we have to do and to be in relationship to each other and with each other. And I really don't think that anything happens outside of the form or the structure of relationship. And when we think about nature, if you think about it, nature only is in relationship to. And by the way, when you thought about what you love most from nature, I urge you to say that you probably did not think about the human being, because we've been so trained to think ourselves separate from nature. I've asked this question hundreds of times, if not thousands. I've never heard someone say, I love human beings. Not that we don't love human beings, we just don't think of us in the context of nature. And I think that in some ways has been by design. So when we design schools, I'll briefly talk about our experience in Córdoba, in central Argentina. We invite people to reimagine everything that a school can be and everything that learning can look like. So if schools did not exist the way they do, and they were intentionally designed to fulfill a purpose, what might you imagine a school to be like if you had to start from zero? And that's usually our starting question. What school would you do today? What school would you do here? What school would you do now? And what school would you do for this group of families and of children? I'm hopeful because increasingly more people ask us to help design experiences, and experiences that are rooted in place and experiences that are rooted in nature. So I specifically thought that I would share the experience of Umepai, which is a community in Córdoba, in really central Argentina, where about 200 families lived together intentionally, and they needed to design a school for about 30 of their children going into first and second grade. And so when we started our work, we took them out to the river, and in the most beautiful valley you can imagine, with a forceful river of ice cold water flowing through this valley where they live. And as the adults got together in a circle and we were planning our design session, I looked around at all of these kids, the kids that would be schooled and other kids who were older and other kids who were younger, were running around, and some were climbing rocks and some were climbing trees and some were creating swords to have sword battles and some were digging in the ground. And a group of kids were teaching another group of kids how to do paper airplanes with the paper stacks we had brought for our design session. And all sorts of things were going on. And so I asked the parents in the group who would be designing the school to just spend half an hour taking notes of everything they saw. And in those 30 minutes, these kids designed worlds and they destroyed them. And then they rebuilt them. And they learned from each other. And they were running around and they were sitting down and they were calm and quiet, but they were also excited and dangerously audacious. And we brought the session back together and we said, we're going to design a school for these kids. Whatever we do has to be able to offer a heightened experience than that experience which they already have. We cannot design a schooling experience that will bring them outside of this beautiful natural context and lock them inside a classroom to do what we have always done and what we've been used to doing. That does not make any sense. And so we decided to look at a project-based expeditionary model. But what we did was something really interesting because there are so many resources in this community. So we designed a very simple structure where every 5 weeks, kids would go through an expeditionary process. And the first expedition was going to be the vegetable garden. No particular reason. We just thought that was a very good starting point. So these kids in first and second grade designed their vegetable beds, and they designed and thought about the plants that they wanted to bring to these vegetable beds. And they did all the work themselves. And as they were doing this over 5 weeks, we did some of what the formal curriculum asks of us. We did some math and we did some writing and reading, but all the words were words that belonged to the realm of the vegetable garden and the natural world. And they were contextualized. And all the math we did belonged to the realm of seeds and counting seeds and weighing soil and doing whatever we could do with numbers in the world. So at no point did kids ask, why are we doing this? At no point did any of this feel external to the action-driven project they were engaged in. And they finished their beautiful vegetable garden and they presented it to the community of parents and guests. But then, of course, we needed to bring water to the vegetable garden. So we started weaving a kind of a macro story that would bring all of these experiences together. So if the first expedition was the vegetable garden, the second expedition would be water. And once water came, with water came the bugs and the insects that ate through all the beautiful plants they had planted. So the third expedition was insects. And you see how we start weaving something that always makes sense. So that there's no need to ask, why am I learning this? But rather, how do we integrate what we're learning to where we are? And I start with this story because it seems to me that in order to understand and how to shift our sense of how we relate to nature, we have to be in relationship and feel a sense of belonging to nature. And what we've done for centuries in cities and in urban contexts is to try to put nature out. Initially, we did it physically by building walls that would protect us from all sorts of harms. But I often walk through schools and I rarely find living plants inside classrooms. We've left nature out of our learning environments. And it would be, I think, strange, if not completely miraculous, if we all developed a sense of care for something we did not know anything about. And if we don't spend time in nature, if we don't spend time trying to understand our relationship, our symbiotic relationship to nature, I think it'll be really difficult to create a different sense of belonging, but also of mutual care. Of course, nature doesn't need to ask itself how it cares for us because it does it all the time. But I think building this relationship in nature is fundamental. And to close, I think I'll just say something that Gordon Hempton, a beautiful man who does acoustic ecology, says is, all you need to do in a city is grab a group of unschooled children and take them for a city walk. And all they will point out to and see is nature. They will point out to leaves and branches and ponds and puddles, and they will just see and play with nature all around them. I think it's really a shift in learning to see who we are and learning to see where we are. And that shift will help us understand how to teach and what to teach and where to teach differently.
Wonderful. Juan, thank you. Thank you so much. I guess for me, the three words or notions here that reverberate are reciprocity, belonging, and the centrality of relationships. And that all connects then to both the natural world, our environment, where we are, our sense of place, and the purpose of schools. And clearly, it is not about isolating and segregating children. There's one last thing before we go on to Ramji, and that is the term nature deficit disorder. Some of us or most of us might have heard this. It's very real, and it has very real social and emotional and cognitive impact in the lives of children. And just because you live in a city doesn't mean that you need to be nature deficit. Okay, Juan, again, thank you so much for framing around our three guiding questions. Ramji Raghavan is the founder and the CEO and the visionary behind the Agastya International Foundation. He's composed an extraordinary and important story over the last 26 years of transforming over 172 acres of what was desecrated and destroyed forest, and through regeneration, transformed it into a thriving ecosystem and into one of the world's great experiential education hubs. It's my pleasure to give you Ramji Raghavan.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be talking to all of you. So my interest and love for nature, I suppose, came almost naturally, if you like, because I was sent to a boarding school at the age of 5, not because I was particularly mischievous or anything, but this was a unique school founded by a great philosopher, J. Krishnamurti, who had a mystical relationship with nature. So I spent 11 years in that school, Rishi Valley, and every evening we would all walk up to a little hill and observe the sunset. And, we played a lot of sports and games around trees because there were a lot of trees. So when I started the Agastya Foundation and got this arid landscape, which wasn't my first preference, I was hoping for a Himalayan meadow, but instead all I could get was a barren, rocky wasteland, 170 odd acres. And I remember one very hot summer afternoon standing on the land with my father, and he looked at me and said, "You look rather disappointed." And I said, "Yes, I was hoping for a Himalayan meadow, and look what I've got." And he laughed and he said, "Listen, old boy, that's where you come in. Your job is to transform this barren wasteland into a Himalayan meadow." And that was sort of like an epiphany for me. And I said, never thought of that. And I should have given my background. So I said, we need to create an ecological preserve, whatever that meant. And over the years, I managed to attract some environmentalists, conservators of forests and so on. And they took on the job because this was not just about doing something nice. There was a lot of science in it. and the environmentalist called his strategy gentle manipulation, which I thought was a lovely phrase for not just the regeneration of the land, but for regeneration of the mind, and perhaps, in many other contexts. So today we have a campus, besides all the science and arts and experiential learning centers, a large open-air ecology lab with about 600 species of plants, herbs, shrubs, 70-odd species of butterflies, nearly 600 species of moths. And I'm rattling off these numbers to you because we actually had somebody come and study all this and write a few books on what they found. So that's sort of the ecological transformation. But the important thing is, how do we get the Agastya staff, the ignators, as we call them, our teachers, and the children, learn from nature? So nature-centric learning over the years has become very important. One, from a purely scientific basis, nature happens to be the greatest laboratory. There's a lot of science you can learn from it. So when children come into our labs, they're very exciting, interesting. Whenever possible, they are taken outside the classroom, tons of nature around, and they learn chemistry from a pond, or from studying the soil, or photosynthesis from doing experiments out there in nature. Same thing for the arts. We send the students out to observe and then come back and draw from their observations. You can learn math from nature. So there's a lot of learning in terms of the traditional subjects that one can acquire through questioning, observation, experimenting, making unusual connections in a natural environment. And then we have the famous eco walk, morning eco walk, where an ecologist takes visitors and students on a walk explaining the medicinal value of different herbs and plants. Indian Ayurveda is a very old tradition, and we've developed these concept gardens and an extensive vocabulary and research on the medicinal value of different herbs. So to make it interesting, we created a giant-sized figure. It's half man, half woman. It's probably 100 feet tall on a hillside, on which we've planted different herbs that are good for those particular organs. So visitors and children can actually walk on these figures and learn in a very experiential way the value of these plants. The other thing we're doing is what we call vanasnanam in Sanskrit. The English equivalent would be forest bathing. So we have created spots in the forest, which is now the campus, where people can go and sit and just literally bathe in nature and think or meditate or just keep quiet or listen to the sounds of nature. So creative learning and creative being are two things that we're really focused on. We're also developing a lot of nature-inspired exhibits. For example, we're building a 20-foot tall termite hill. I'm particularly interested in termites because of the concepts of emergence and complexity and all of that. And I'd like actually the foundation to be a self-organizing system. So I said, let's investigate termite hills. And then we said, let's just build a giant-sized termite hill so children can walk in and actually get an immersive experience of what it might be like to, if not be a termite, at least to understand how termites live. So you can extend that concept, and now we're going to also build a giant-sized beehive. So nature-based learning in different ways, nature-centric learning, is emphasized, reinforced all the time. There is a powerful concept in Indian philosophy called Bandhu, B-A-N-D-H-U. At a top level, it's kind of being a friend. I'm your Bandhu. or developing a bond. At a very deep level, it's about the idea that everything, every being, everything is interconnected. In fact, in Indian philosophy, almost everything is a manifestation of something divine. Hence, you'll find in India sometimes people worshipping a rock or a tree or whatever. And what that breeds is a real connection with the environment. So Bandhu is something we are promoting. We've called one of our programs for kids who come from far off places to spend time on the campus, the Bandhu program, to create the sense of interconnection. The other thing we're doing, or I'm trying to promote, is the whole idea of creating imaginary natural worlds in your mind. You know, creative visualization. Imagine a world, you know, forget about all the problems. What would a dream world be like for you? A nature-infused world. And from there, you get a lot of concepts and lots of ideas. And many of them have been hiding in plain sight. For instance, we are surrounded by rocks, not on campus, but near the campus. And we never thought, you know, we could do something with rocks. So now we are going to create a kind of rock landscape where you learn the science of rocks, soil, stones, have rock sculptures, have a rock stage to stage theater, drama, music, make it a rock immersive experience. So I will end here by saying we're hopefully creating an environment where nature is center stage. And we have a very large outreach program. We reach about 6 million kids a year across India. So the next step would be, how do we take some of these learnings and distribute them through our distribution channels, mobile science vans and science centers and so on across the country. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about some of the things we're doing here at Agastya. I'm on the campus today. It's a lovely day. It's mist all over the hills. You can hear the birds, and I intend to go out for a walk in the night with my colleague Suresh, who runs the campus, and he said he might, if we're lucky, we might spot a few wild boar, might see a snake or two. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Ramji, thank you very much. I can attest to the fact of the wild boars and the snakes and the most populated creature, the wild monkeys and wild peacocks. I think that there's so many connections and echoes of what you said and what Juan had to say, and with hope at the center and the imagination, and how you as educators create conditions for people to think, um, to think the kinds of worlds that they would like to inhabit and live in, whether it's a school, their community, and giving people that, children and teachers, that opportunity really broadens and stretches one's capacity for thinking in different ways, in different pathways. I think the two words that stand out for me also are this idea of both creative learning and what that actually looks like, and then finally creative being. And when you raise the echo walks, Ramji, it is so much about being intentional, observant, and continuously in relationship with the things around you, whether they are living things, human beings, or inanimate things. So thank you for helping to frame this. I think, Emmanuel, we're going to take about 45 seconds I'm going to pass it to you and put a bit of music on.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Juan and Ramji. Beautiful and inspiring story. Now it's time to have some conversation. Before David asks you to take some notes, We're going to share on the chat now 3 questions, 3 prompts, but they're not here to condition the conversation. Basically, we're going to be about 5 or 6 people per breakout room. You can start answering those questions here. Yeah, thank you very much. And whatever emerges is good. One thing we're going to ask you is at the beginning, when you get together, is to choose a gardener, okay? Who is the gardener? The gardener is the person who's going to harvest the insight of the conversation and share them afterwards in plenary, okay? 1 or 2 insights from the conversation would be enough. All right, so we're going to the breakout room. First thing to do, first we invite you to copy those questions in the chat. Let me put them again here. Oops, just a moment. 3 questions. Again, you don't have to feel conditioned by these questions. They're just prompt to get started. And after we come back in plenary and share a few insights and continue the conversation all together. Is this clear? Yes, are we good? Any questions? No? Lovely. Well,
I'm creating the breakout rooms and you'll be redirected soon.
Yeah, in the meantime, you can go back to your notes, listen to the music, pause, slow down to the rhythm of life, and just reflect. We'll also invite you in the breakout room to make sure that everybody speaks. You hear all voices. All right. So, well, welcome to the land of unfinished conversations. Okay, so I hope it went well. It was great in our breakout room. We're going to use the time now. There's a time constraint, but still, if some of the gardener could share a bit of some insight from the conversation, that'd be fantastic. Any volunteer here? Any gardener would like to share some insight? Yes, Jane, thank you. You on mute?
Yes, it was very exciting to be with Ramesh, who is dug into the project described. We didn't get to hear enough of him to hear from Middlebury, Vermont, Hector, talking about how people are in this very immersive natural environment with their phones. And so how restricted it is at the world that we're in and contradictory. And for Juan to talk about how the schools in Argentina are breaking out because there are fewer funds to finance education as it used to be, so people are being creative in what is. And I just felt immersed in a way in this level of discussion that I haven't for decades, since I worked with Hubert Diassi at City College at the workshop center at City College, and was educated there and ended up leading programs there. And so thrilling. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you for sharing the harvest. Anyone else? Any other gardener would like to share? David, you're on mute. I see your lips moving.
Sorry. Yes. I'm going to volunteer Ramji and Bill, particularly in terms of the conversation around inertia and also the kind of shifts that are taking place actually in a public school system such as India. Ramji or Bill, can you jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were discussing why there is this level of inertia in the education system. And that seems to be true across a lot of countries. In fact, I recall back in 2010 or something, I was at the World Education Forum speaking in London. And there was a lady from Colombia who spoke about how they were trying to change the education system from within, right? From within the school system. And I was talking about Agastya, which is an intervention from without, from outside, acting as a catalyst. And I think generally everyone felt that ideally you want to change it from within. And I would agree myself. Except that a famous educator came online, and this was teleconferenced around the world, and he said, almost no one has been able to change any education system anywhere in the world. And he quoted even some of the greatest educators because of this massive inertia. Okay? So it is a problem, but it's not an insuperable problem. So there's inertia born of perhaps ignorance, lack of risk-taking, just towing the line and so on and so forth. Also, teachers get used to teaching in a certain way, and it's very comfortable, and to keep changing and, the way you teach or the way you learn, and there are lots of shifts in power and so on and so forth. Not an easy thing to do. On the positive side, at the systemic level in a country like India, going back 5 years, the government central government in Delhi decided that they were going to have a new education policy, which talks about shifting from how to think, from what to think to how to think, and from what to learn to how to learn, and a greater focus on things like curiosity, innovation, flexibility in terms of the curriculum, and many other kind of liberating policies. The big challenge now will be, especially in a big country like India, how do you make all this happen? You have to work through about 1 million headmasters and 6 million school teachers. And, things will obviously happen incrementally. Another important thing, I remember I was giving a talk in Helsinki some years ago, and at that time, and perhaps even today, people said that Finland had the best school system. So I asked the head of the government education department, so what's the secret behind this? And the person said, it's just one word. One word. I said, what is it? He said, trust. That's it. It's the trust between the government and the school teachers and headmasters. They trust the government to do the right thing by them. And we trust them to do the right thing in terms of implementation. And that makes all the difference. So trust, I think, is a vital part of all this, and easier said than done. But if you have a low trust system, then it doesn't matter how great your policies are, not much is going to happen. If you have a high trust system, and even if you don't have an Einstein running the education system, a lot of great things can happen. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Ramji. Any other groups that a spokesperson? Manuel, I saw you have...
Yeah, we've got a great gardener in our group. That's Stephen.
Great. Excellent.
Thank you. That was amazing, what you just shared. And trust is definitely the foundation of all education. In our group, we had a couple of highlights and a couple of challenges we identified. So highlights were things we took away in observations. One was that we do see, and I agree, others in our group, that in elementary years, kindergarten through 4th grade in the US, we do see more nature exposure in schools, but it feels like it slips away by 5th grade as content shifts and standards change. And one thing that I think we all appreciated was how the previous speakers have made nature accessible through to children, learning accessible in nature to children through immersion. How seamless you made it sound, and it really is. Children as natural experimenters and learners. The couple of challenges, one is, we most of our education is in cities where the people are, and the challenge of transferring the experience of immersion in these large structures and in these environments to children who have a day-to-day life in the city and don't experience mountains and rivers and giant rocks and things like that. And the second one was somewhat similar to what you were just talking about, Ramji, which is the challenge of systems and structures. For me, it was about there being so many priorities that they crowd each other out. And that's how bureaucracies grow and they feed on different priorities, competing priorities. So inevitably, access to nature and using nature as a classroom is crowded out by other priorities. And I think the response to what Ramji just shared, as well as that problem, is that if the use of nature as a sacred place of learning and focus of learning isn't a part of the value system and belief system of the entire program, then it will not work. So for me, it comes down to beliefs and values. And if those are clearly stated by the leaders, and they can then be embedded into everything in appropriate ways. So that was what our group talked about, and really interesting to meet these amazing people. Thank you.
Stephen, thank you. There was one thing I wanted to add, and I will put it in the chat. One of the classic books about how to make a city into a learning resource for children is by Lucy Sprague Mitchell, written in the beginning, actually, first 2 decades of the 20th century. It's called Young Geographers. And it's all about how to tap into that expeditionary, adventuresome kind of curiosity that all children have about where they are, whether it's a city, whether it's the countryside, and how to use field work and field trips as an essential part of the experience of all children.
Thank you,
I'll put it
David.
in the chat.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you,
well,
David.
I can report a little bit from another group. Just a couple of things here. One is that Nitesh mentioned about that diving into nature gives pleasure, which is an important concept and tied back to something that Juan mentioned, which is with this kind of experiential learning, there's no need to ask why we're learning this, which is a critical motivational concept. The other is about, and Ramesh just talked about, why isn't education more integrated? Why is it so focused on academics? And Shaya pointed out the real need to have examples and syllabus so that teachers know what to do and have a roadmap for it. Ramesh went over some other things, and one of the things he did mention, which didn't come up again, is that the inertia keeps you rooted in today. And if you want to build an innovative nation, innovative culture, then you need to take risks. That's it from our group.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much. Anyone else before we move on to the next part? Yes?
We talked about, Dan talked about how we forget to be creative beings in nature, and that we didn't really get to expand too much, but he was talking about how we don't think about some of the negative effects of technology. John, who works in school improvement, was saying that school improvement always seems to be about crowding more and more things in, and that what he tries to talk about is creating time and space for everybody. Kerry pointed out that nature study is not new, that there was a nature study movement in the 1800s, but that over time, it got separated from the classroom and moved it into either recreation or a separate subject. And that it came back a little bit in the 70s, but more as field trips. And that there's still the issues of it being separate, and this question of how do you integrate it in a deep kind of way into everything that's happening in the school. And we did talk about the question of, what are the purposes of schools? And I was saying that so much of the emphasis is on sorting kids out and that's what the tests are about, and that it's not about enabling everybody to really be themselves in a natural environment, but sort of how are you going to be sorted out.
If I could just add one thing that I'm hearing, I want to put back on the table this concept that Ramji raised of Bandhu, and how that very notion of the interconnectedness of everything, which is of course central to our understanding of ecology, how that needs to supersede the notion of coverage, right? So that kind of a shift in attitude is, I think, central to making these kinds of small incremental changes. That it's about helping children make connections between knowledge, between the world, between each other, as opposed to this myopic sense that you urgently must cover information. Yeah.
David, may I add to that?
Please do.
I think it's good to remember also that the current or the education system that we've all been trained in comes from a time where the scientific and this is an old framework where the scientific mindset believed that in order to understand the world, you had to break it up into small pieces and you needed to understand the parts. Yeah. And in a complex world full of of very difficult complexities that we need to think about solving, focusing on the parts is insufficient. We need to understand the relationships between the parts. But unfortunately, our education system is not designed to be good at understanding relationships. That's why we don't understand human relationships. That's why we don't understand relationships between things that seem separate. So I really think this is a good opportunity, a moment to rethink and to ask deep questions and redirect the efforts, setting them to new intentions.
And David, if I may, there's a point before you end the session I wanted to make, which I didn't, which is the importance of storytelling. There's one, you can try and communicate concepts and ideas and so on. And a lot of people don't relate to that. They relate better to stories. And I'll give you an example. It might sound far-fetched, but when I was living in London, I was watching a program on BBC. This is some 25 years ago. And they were interviewing a great Indian spiritualist. And he narrated a story, a kind of fantastical story about there was this rishi, Vyasa, who could communicate with all animals. So he was walking down the road when he saw these insects running, looking very worried. So he asked the insects, "What's troubling you? And where are you running?" And they said, "Oh, don't you know? We can hear, because they're close to the ground, Arjuna's chariot coming." Arjuna was the prince in the Bhagavad Gita and the greatest warrior. So when Arjuna's chariot comes on the road, everyone must move aside. And we are very afraid that his chariot might run over our family members. So we are running to tell them that Arjuna's chariot is coming. Now, this is a story you might tell a child, but to a grown-up like me, it struck a chord. Years later, I was sitting having dinner with my family and my young daughter, Gina, then, she's still young, but she was a lot younger then, happened to see an ant walking by. And she did what a lot of people would do, ant coming near her food, and she just stamped on it. And I said, "Hey, why did you do that? You could have picked it up and put it outside in the garden." And she said, "No, Daddy, it's not, it might bite me." And I said, "Maybe it was going to see its family." And she said, "Huh?" And then her whole face was bathed in tears. Now, I can tell you something. Maybe it was that incident, but today, if she sees a fly in our home or a cockroach, the first thing she'll do is take a piece of paper, capture it, and go and put it outside somewhere. So, no amount of telling her that it's not good to do this or not good to do that might or might not have worked. Just one kind of story made all the difference. So if we can come up with great stories about nature and about being more sensitive and interconnectedness and all that, that might go a long way in bringing about behavioral change.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you for sharing this story, Ramji. Okay, so yeah, we still have 13 minutes, and well, the idea here today was a bit to whet your appetite and to see what we could do together. This is not a one-off. Where the invitation is to carry on, to see how we can remove artificial barriers together, to learn from nature, Pachamama, okay, through the concept of Bantu and Ubuntu. I am because you are. So we're going to propose to you 3 pathways to continue this this collaboration. And I'm going to share my screen if I can here. Okay. Let me know. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Lovely. So basically we've designed here 3 pathways. And the doorway would be our email address. So I'll ask one of the organizers to share it in the chat. And in case you lose it, you can connect any one of us. So basically, after this session, you can continue to engage with the community, okay, by choosing one of the 3 different pathways, okay? Each path offers a different way to contribute, okay? From a quick individual reflection to light touch group coordination, allowing you to participate in a way that best suits you. So what's the first one? It's basically here. It's best for one-time contributors with minimal time. After the session, you might want to share a reflection contribution. So it's a short individual reflection. Write a brief email sharing a new idea or practice that resonated with you from today's salon. That's the first one, again, through our email address. The second option is to join a garden. It's about a collaborative deep dive to participate in a thematic groups conversation, okay, which is going to be organized the same through our organization. In this case, you join a self-organized online meeting with a small groups, which is going to emerge from this salon. The will choose a topic or several topics, and afterwards share the key learning with the wider community. It's best for those who want to exchange experience collaboratively. And here you see, little by little, we can see emerging some kind of ecosystem here. And finally, the caretaker. So it is more about support and gentle coordination. It's about taking a light stewardship role to help maintain the continuity for a group or several groups of conversation until the next session. Send reminder and help capture a short summary of takeaways. A bit of facilitation as well. Here again, if you want to have more information about the how, just write an email to us and we'll answer to you as soon as possible, explaining the how. So these are the three roles, the 3 pathways. And now we've got 10 minutes left. So it's time little by little to do the wrap up. John, here is the button.
I was just going to add that what we're really hoping to come out of all of this, and not just this salon or even this first 3 salons, but the overall project, is to encourage the creation of networks of people like all of us here communicating with each other across borders and across time zones. And for people to, in these options that Emmanuel presented, for people to take them in whatever directions seem to make the most sense to you, and recognizing that there'll be multiple ones. So one of the things that, as a housekeeping thing, is that everybody can communicate with us through the info email, but we would love for people to share their emails with each other. And in respect of people's privacy, we don't want to be in a position of sharing people's emails with each other unless people voluntarily do. So one of the things is that on the feedback form, which we're going to ask people to fill out, it says, yes, I give you permission to share my email. And also you can put that in the chat if you'd like. And then what we can do is we can create, a whatever it is, where everybody can see each other's emails and people can share with each other and continue these conversations. And I think that's really one of the key points is that, as we've been getting together to plan this, and it's been a number of months that we've been getting to know each other from different groups, from different countries and so on, is how do we create something that's both hopefully interesting and stimulating, as I at any rate found this meeting very much to be, but also something that isn't a one-off, and where it isn't a case that, okay, come Monday morning, everybody goes back to real life, and this is just a nice thing that happened. But how do we create something where it gets turned into action in whatever forms action might take for people, whether it's something very, very concrete that you can do if you're in a classroom situation, or if it's a out of school time program. What are specific ways that something new that you might do that came out of this conversation? Or if you want to follow up with something that somebody either in your breakout group or in this plenary said, that'll lead to a different way of thinking about things, something new that you hadn't thought about before. And Emmanuel is putting in the chat, what seed do you take with you and what will you water in the next 30 days? And so this is asking for it to be very concrete. What small or large thing do you envision doing as a result of this? And then along those lines, in our next, excuse me, our next salon is going to be on January 31st. And we're setting it up so that if you only registered for today, you can register both for that salon and also for the third salon, which is going to be on February 21st. And we picked 3 weeks because we didn't want to be crowding people's schedules with it being every other week. But on the other hand, we didn't want to lose, the flow of thoughts. And we hope both, obviously, that everybody would like to rejoin in these salons, and also that you share this with colleagues and friends. And one of the things that has been pointed out as we've been talking is that change is most likely to happen if it's in a cohort, if it's not just one person in a school or a program, but if people can come in 2s and 3s and 10s, whatever, that it's more likely to actually result in change. And some of the issues that people raised, such as how do you break the inertia in systems? This is definitely one of the things that we're really interested in. How, with all the exciting things that are happening around the world, how do we move them from, in many cases, being individual or isolated or small things to being large scale? And obviously, Ramji talked in terms of, the amazing outreach that Agastya has, which also means working with state governments all over India, working with school districts and schools all over. Juan was, worked with, on a national level with how do you integrate, environmental studies into school systems. And at the same time, recognizing, that school systems are, by and large, created to replicate their existing societies, and they're not meant to be revolutionary. They're not meant to be subversive. And so education really has this dual function, one of which is that the state and the established forces and many, many parents sort of expect that it's going to simply replicate. And on the other hand, it's also one of the few universal means of from using the metaphor, the grassroots um, of subversive change.
Mm.
So I think just, that please do fill out the feedback form. And, most of them are, and Amanda just added it to the chat, and take the time. They're all open-ended questions. And hopefully we can share them with everybody, either with your name or without, so that they can be part of the ongoing conversation.
Yes.
Great.
And we have the website. Just one last thing. The website is globalconversations.net. And we had this interesting question of why isn't it called Educating for the World We Want? Or why isn't it called Saturday Salons? Or why isn't it called something else? And of course, the reality is that you go on and you look for a domain name and you look for something that's available and that has some relationship to what you're doing. And so that's why it's globalconversations.net. And it also includes some of the details about the speakers who are going to be, just as Juan and Ramji were doing today, at our next two sessions.
I would add, if I could.
Just one thing, David.
Yeah, go on, Emmanuel.
Jane raised her hand. So.
Thank you.
Quick question. Will you be emailing out the questionnaire? Because it's always hard for me to load it during a Zoom and then keep it.
So you're referring to the feedback form. The feedback form. Sure. We'll make it available, and we're making a kind of impromptu decision on the website, so that if you don't stick around, and we're going to keep the Zoom room open for another 15 minutes when we end, that you can fill it out and then just send it to us directly.
And we can also email it to everybody as well.
Yeah.
We just want to make it as easy for people to fill out as possible.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. David, just before, please, I'd like to jump in to express my gratitude to every one of you for the energy we've co-created in this first salon, for all the organizer, and also, of course, to Juan and Ramji. It's been great to have you in this first session. Really, we've been very lucky. And also, not to forget Sophia for the interpretation, and Amanda for being in the backstage and managing all the messages in the background. So thank you very much all. David.
Yes. No, thank you all for giving us your Saturday. Deeply appreciated. So we'll stay on for another 10 minutes or so, for those of you who want to finish the feedback form. And for those of you who wish to dance, also feel free to as well.
Thank you, everyone. This was wonderful.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
And you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There we go.
Yes, sir. You can log out. They're filling the forms.
Okay. You can sign off.
And David, aren't you supposed to sing for the wrap up?
I'm leaving that to Suresh.